Okay.
What's everyone? Welcome back to the Kyokushin Shuffle, Japan Chronicles. Here we go. Told you we were going to get moving on things. We're all back into some normality in life, as they say. So we appreciate the listeners. Fantastic last episode, Xian Sean. Thank you so much for that. Great responses. It's great to see. There's a lot of people listening. There's 1,000 also every fortnight, nearly 2,000 a month that are jumping onto our episodes, Xian. So to all your listeners out there, if you're grabbing nuggets out of this, fantastic. So special guest today out of Tokyo, and this is why the Japan Chronicles has been a success. We're trying to get into the essence of Japan, and Xian Sean's lived there for nearly 25, 30 years, and Robert Sensei is our guest today. So Xian Sean, please have the honor of introduction, and we're looking forward to this chat.
Oh, thanks, Sensei. Yeah, well, it's been a long time coming. I've always wanted to get Robert on. The photo in the background is of an international Budo seminar that was run by the Ministry of Education and Sports here. And Robert and I were long time sort of participants in that. I went along and pretended to interpret what was being said by the Japanese and threw in a few funnies here and again to keep people awake. And one day Robert comes up and he goes, "Oh, you do Kyokushin?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, I used to do that." And then I do this now. And then that's where the friendship started. Every year after that, we'd see each other once, for 3 days in March and catch up. And then we found out we had a mutual mate in Nick Pettis. So the community is pretty small. We don't live in a small country. We live kind of in a large village when it comes to martial arts here. And so that's the story behind that. So, as someone else that spent a large part of his life in Japan and gone down a few different paths, as I'm really looking forward to hearing more about, I thought it'd be really good for the listeners to hear of Rob's experiences here in Japan and beyond. And just gives people a different perspective because, we don't want to just give you our subjective view. The more people we can get on who can share their thoughts and experiences, I think people can take a lot more away from that. So yeah, Rob, so tell us your story. Where did it all begin? Began in Canada. That's right, wasn't it? Yeah.
That's right. I grew up in Montreal, Canada, and I was fortunate to start karate there way back. We're going back to 1984, yeah. One of my schoolmates invited me to the dojo to start together, and luckily it was a Kyokushin dojo and a good instructor. Back then I was in boarding school, so I had to get a special permission from my parents. My parents asked the school a special request for me to leave the school twice a week to go train karate. That was pretty special.
Wow.
So really appreciative about that. And then that's where it began. Just 2 days a week, all the events, the tournaments, the camps. We had always a big summer camp, some outdoor winter training, and just basically stuck to it. Yeah. Our first instructor in the kids class was Xian Alain Bonami, who was of course a strong karate fighter who moved on to pro kickboxing, and then moved on to pro boxing, actually. So he was running the kids class back then. So active competitor teaching us was really, really amazing. And then Xian Andre Gilbert would run a bunch of classes too, either the later classes or special events and all that. So really exposed to two amazing people right at a young age. It was really great.
Wow. And they're big names in the Kyokushin world. Yeah, I mean, I think Shihan Gilbert, he's with Shin Kyokushin now, isn't he? Or is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. A big figure in the Kyokushin world out of Canada. I mean, you would have been blessed with a huge front line of, I mean, even to this day in Canada, there's so many great instructors, and you can see that front line now too have developed in a really nice way. But Montreal has always been really strong with Kyokushin, hasn't it?
I think so. And it was established quite a ways back. Xian Gilbert, if I recall, his branch certificate is like 1974 or something like that. And even before that, there was another fellow. So the foundations were set quite early. And then there's Xian Korgal out west, in Richmond, who was established also way back. So we had both sides of the country kind of with a good foundation, and over time built up good teams of students. They're on instructors and definitely competitors too.
Yeah.
So
and then what brought you to Japan?
Well, of course, karate, huh? So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
first
Good answer. There
the
you go.
first trip the first trip was in '91. But actually, that was for the World Tournament. We were supporting Jean Rivière and a few other teammates, Marc Morier. We had 4 guys, I believe. Christian Ouellet. But actually, I was supposed to come in '87. But back then, I was competing snowboarding too, so I couldn't miss school for excessive periods of time, right? I would
I
have been
couldn't get
kicked
too many
out.
passes. Yeah, okay.
So, yeah, exactly. So I missed that one. I missed '87. Then '91 was the next one. So of course I jumped on that. We were a big team of supporters, like 60 people came by,
Wow.
came down, and finally made it. So I ended up sticking around after the tournament. I stayed like 2, 3 weeks. My parents were a bit freaking out. Communication wasn't so
Yeah.
sharp as now, right, with the internet. So we're
Right.
using like international phone cards through the
Oh, the
public
green
phone.
phones. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. So,
I do. I do.
finally, yeah, just after that trip, it was like, okay, I got to come back. I met Nicholas and Judd back then. They were still in the Uchideshi program. So then talking with them, and which I was training at Humble a bit during that visit after the tournament. They're like, Rob, if you want to train, this is the place to be. You got to come back. And it's like, okay, that's just stuck to me. And then went back to Montreal, work basically. I was doing seasonal jobs, working for the city, public works.
Mhm.
And then in the winter, I was working as a ski and snowboard tech, so tuning up the boards and the skis. And then in between seasons, I would travel back to Japan, just on short trips, like 2, 3 weeks and stuff like that.
Wow.
So that's how things got
So
rolling.
you would have been witness to the simultaneous Ushiro Mashigiri with
Oh, I was
Iwashi.
there.
Yeah,
Yes, 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 yes.
that was so
Yeah,
famous.
that's,
I've still got the original tape of that.
yeah,
Oh,
same here. I have it. Yeah, that was legendary. That was so like, if you look at it, it could be fixed. It could be
Yeah,
choreographed, but
you're
it
right.
was live. It was so live.
yeah,
Like
it was
everybody
amazing.
was stunned. There was a moment of silence there. And full side too. I think it was, oh shit. Like,
Incredible.
Yeah, because
yeah,
I think when I met you the first
mm,
time at the seminar,
yeah,
you'd gone on from your Kyokushin days and you were,
mm,
living in Japan full time, and you'd gone across to Kudo or Daido-juku.
yeah.
Is that right?
That's
Yeah.
right. Back then, if it was the first seminar, I forget how many years now we're at, but it closed up 5 years ago now already. The
Well,
seminar
they changed the format to
format, yeah.
exchange students and foreign diplomats here.
So maybe 5 years before that or so. Yeah, I was training in Daido-juku. So I had met Azuma Sensei by coincidence at a bookstore up in Nerima, because I used to live up in Nerima, and his
Okay.
old dojo was there. So I'm at a bookstore, and I see this fellow. I'm like, oh, it must be him, right?
Wow.
Like
Yeah.
I'm kind of peeking over the aisles,
That
and he's
huge
with his family.
back of it, right?
I didn't want to be too obvious, right? So I look at his hands, right? Look at his knuckles. I'm like, oh yeah, that's him. So I go up to him right away. I was like, oh, are you Azuma Shihan? And he's like, yes, yes. Oh, like asking me, like, who the hell are you? So, oh, basically, I train in Kyokushin. I'm about to test. That was in '97 to be precise.
Wow.
I was just about to test for sandan at Hombu, and he's like, oh, gambatte kudasai and this and that. And I said, oh, by the way, I saw one of your video tapes. And I said, I love it. I love the stuff because I used to do judo before. He's like, oh, really? Yeah, okay. It's whatever, He's like, just gambatte and hopefully see you again. So that was the first meeting. The second meeting is I was in Montreal, and then one fellow had come over to Canada, and then Azuma Sensei called me. He's like, oh, we have a guy coming over. Meet up and train with him. So we actually went to TriStar, which is the gym where all the guys, all the MMA guys are training. Yeah, it was before it was big. Now it's quite big. Before it was a standard kickboxing gym.
Yeah.
Before it got to MMA, so we trained there in the summer when our advanced classes would shut down for the summer. So this fellow came over to Montreal and trained with him. We had mats. They had a matted room at the TriStar for judo. Everything was split disciplines back then. And then I was like, well, this is awesome. So then that's how that started. I wanted to come back to Japan, and then I applied for Uchideshi with Azuma Sensei, and was accepted. So did 8 months there at the Hombu.
Wow.
Which was really, really cool. Yeah. Great experience.
So how did your
Technical and
Kyokushin background and you said you did judo, but I mean,
mm,
to me, and I don't know enough, this is a novice sort of view of things, but
uh-huh.
it seemed to me that, you know, Azuma Shihanan, I've met him a couple of times, but
Yeah.
he blended the two so well together, you know.
Yeah.
What was the transition like for you going from that Kyokushin background into something
Yeah.
that blended karate and judo?
Yeah. Good question. So the training is still done kind of separate. So we'd have the kihon is basically all the stand-up strikes.
Right.
So you got the striking, the kicking, and then you have a sweep, one ashibarai sweep to complete the kihon. And then you do all the ukemi rolls, right, from judo and similar to aikido. Mai kaiten ukemi, ushiro ukemi, the shrimp, you know, this and that. So the classes are kind of separate. And then there's like a judo day where there's someone who's more specialized in judo. He's a Daido-juku fellow who would teach us. So that would be all focused on the throws, you know, starting from grappling and focusing on the throws and then balancing and the trips and the groundwork a bit, of course. And then when it came to the sparring, well, then there's levels of sparring. So the beginners would only train Kyokushin rules, so kick, punch, punching to the body only. And then you'd add the punches to the face, right? So you train that, you know, kind of like just Thai boxing setup, offense, defense at first, and then freestyle from there. And then next level up, you're adding the grappling. So then from grappling, you could go to knees, you know, and grappling and punching, grappling and striking. And then eventually you add the full throws, the Thai clinch, and the groundwork.
Wow.
So it was kind of broken down progressive per level, and also for the testing, which was really cool. So you're building up all these skills, and then you have opportunities to kind of blend them together in the freestyle and the ju.
Did you, Sensei Rob, did you go through a patch? So this is 97, 98. You do 8 months of full commitment. Am I assuming it's 5 times a week you were training at Hombu?
Oh, it's 6 days a week. We'd have Sundays off.
So 6 times a week. So my angle in asking is how when you're training, you know, 2nd month, 3rd month, 4th month, you've got you ended up getting close to a sandan sensei status in Kyokushin, correct? Just off?
Yeah, when I met Azuma Sensei was as I was testing, and when I came back to Japan for the Daido-juku stint, there was a few years gap. There's a few years gap in that.
Okay, and where I'm angling it is, plenty of us in regards to that are fortunate to have a shodan and a nidan go through the, hey, you know, remember when you get your shodan in Kyokushin, it's then angled back to the beginning again. And what I'm alluding to is how you then must have visualized or visioned yourself as, hey, this is heading somewhere. It was heading somewhere for you. You obviously attracted to it. You had a great base in Kyokushin, like many of the listeners do, and then they go, "Is this it?" You know that, you know where I'm alluding. Like in Kyokushin, it's like, "Is this it?" And it's like, no, it's not it. There's so much more. There's so much more to deep dive.
Yeah, definitely.
Were you in that frame of mind, or were you in a, "Hey man,
yeah, for sure.
this is epic because of"?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, the Kyokushin system is quite unique, and it has its strong points, but on the same side, there's some things lacking, right? So, but that was my foundation. So that was so important to me, and having met Azuma Sensei, who's come from the same roots, was a no-brainer, right? And then as we started training and mixing up all these aspects, I was like, wow, this is so perfect, because I had my background in judo. So all these things about unbalancing, and then even Thai clinch, you know, like I was like, oh, this is not so bad. I thought I was gonna struggle, but it wasn't that bad, because we had a bit of a base in that feeling of pulled and pushed and thrown around. So then basically it opens a whole new perspective. And what you were asking about is, basically I just started from scratch, right? So, you know, you wear a white belt, and then you just take it from there. The only thing is you'll pass, maybe you'll jump a few Q ranks, and then, you know, go that way. But I wasn't in a rush to get any promotion or anything. I would just follow what they were saying, and I had to be consistent in the training, really. You know, when you're training a lot and sparring every day, it's like Kyokushin, they're sparring every day. So you just got to be healthy, you know, take care of your little tweaks, and wake up the next day with the same drive. Otherwise, it gets scary.
And your journey then after the 8 months, and again, respectfully, I'm not trying to speed things up. It's just such a great timeline already that you're setting up for us. And then you do 8 months or so. What was your next step? Were you someone that's like, wow, I've grabbed something here. What else?
Yes.
Were you a what else type of person, or were you a more of a, hey, it's the 2000s, I'm seeing MMA, or I'm seeing a difference in what's happening
Yeah.
in martial arts?
Mhm. Well, from the technical side, yeah, MMA was already kind of booming, right? So 93, all that, right? K1 launched and
Yep.
UFC. Yeah, I was kind of attracted to it by looking at it, but we were doing pretty much the same thing
Yes.
in Daido-juku with the headgear. So we're doing the same stuff with some tweaks in the rules and not getting banged up. Like, you know, you're
Correct.
able to go to work the next day and your nose
Yes.
is not broken, you're not cut,
Yeah.
whatever.
Because you were wearing those helmets too, weren't you? Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
exactly. That takes some getting used to. So that's a big aspect too. So that was really unique. So from that perspective, I was like, oh, I should establish this in Canada was the plan back then. I was
Okay.
like, I was going to train in Japan, and then I was like, okay, we're going to open a branch in Canada. And then there's a few buddies of mine who came training as well, and they were like, yeah, this is it. We should jump on this opportunity. But then things things moved on. One thing led to another, and it just didn't. My buddies opened up the dojo in Montreal, and I ended up staying here because of work and other reasons. And then every time I would go back, I would coach down there. I would coach the team and support the dojo there. So it was kind of we set up a base, but I wasn't there 100% for the launch of that.
Right.
But yeah, from that
So
aspect, it was something.
how long were you doing Daido-juku for before the next, we'll get to that in a moment, but
The next
you
step.
find yourself in this new
Um,
stage, and that's when,
yeah,
so that's about the time I met you. You were slowly sort of expanding
yeah,
your view of karate, and you had a
yeah,
newfound love for Okinawa and
that's right.
the lineage there. But
That's
how
right.
long
That's
did
right.
you actually spend in Daido-juku?
Daido was a good 10 years or so, yeah,
Wow.
Right.
probably over 10 years because there was a tournament in 2009 that we entered, the World Tournament. So
Yeah.
out of myself and the two buddies, there was always two of us who did a tournament. So the first tournament was 2001, then 2005, then 2009, right?
Mhm.
So I participated in 2009, and then my mates did the two previous ones. So a good 10 years there, and then yeah, after the tournament, things kind of took a bit of a not a pause, but a bit of a slowdown because I was just so busy teaching personal training, strength and conditioning, and then coaching a lot of kickboxing, basically.
Wow.
So holding the pads for a bunch of people. This is just for fitness, not fighters or anything. There was a few guys who were a bit more, advanced, I would say, but not competing. So I was just really busy with that, and it was a bit tricky to continue at the Daido-juku just for the schedule and personal trainers. We teach first thing in the morning when
Mhm.
people are about to go to work, and then we teach in the evening when people are done work or the weekends, right? So it's really a messed up schedule. But things were really picking up, so I was focusing on that a lot. So the karate training, I was just training on my own, basically. I wasn't training at any dojo so much, and I was trying to up my kickboxing, Thai boxing skills. So at Nicholas's gym, also he had his gym.
Yeah.
There was a Muay Thai gym in the area. Go there and then go into Thailand, spending a few weeks there and training at their gyms. So I was kind of trying to up those skills as well. And then after that, the seminars were a big kickoff. The Budo seminar is one, and then also in Okinawa they launched the international seminars, which was sponsored by the Okinawa Prefecture government. So I was kind of eyeing that, and I was like, wow, you can train for a week at a super reasonable price, and you
Mm.
get to experience any ryuha, any style there with your choice of teachers. I'm like, wow, this is super interesting, right? So
Wow.
I signed up for that in that was in 2015, the first one. Um, and then yeah, that opened up a whole new perspective. That's when really karate per se started back with a bang, yeah, with a vengeance. Because it's again another eye opener. Once you go there, things kind of change in perspective because our Kyokushin background we focus on, of course, Kihon, Kata, and Kumite, but Kumite takes a bit of
Mhm.
the spotlight, right? And then
Yeah.
Daido-juku, well, of course, you have Kihon, it's Kumite Kihon, so it's quite different. And then there's no Kata, and then it's all about the Kumite, right? And
Yeah.
since you have such a repertoire of technique, you have enough to work on right there. And then going to Okinawa, well, some schools will focus on kumite. It's a bit more the sport kumite. Some will do the full contact kumite, and then some of the schools will only focus on kata. But the big eye opener was definitely the kata aspect. You know, training in kata, being shown what the moves are for, and yeah, just the logic behind it, why you're doing this, why you're in this position, in what opportunities can you use these techniques. So that was a big eye opener. But before going to Okinawa, there was a fellow here in Tokyo. His name is Joe Swift, who's I would say quite famous historian, translator in the international karate field. Yeah, so he's translated a bunch of books for Okinawa teachers like Kokama Sensei and a bunch of people. So I ended up training with him right around the time I went to that first seminar. So he's quite fluent in Japanese, you know, kind of like you, Sean, and super high level kanji skills. So when it comes to interpreting the historical side or the kata aspect, you know, he was like, wow, it's a super eye opener, like full on encyclopedia of karate. So I was combining training with him in Otaku, it's here in Tokyo, and also attending those summer seminars, which yeah, it just gave me a whole perspective on how to approach Kihon Waza also, not just kata. Kata's a accumulation of Kihon Waza in a way, right? And some advanced techniques. So that was a big shift. Another one.
It was great. Okay. Oh, sorry.
I was just before I forget.
Go ahead.
And for those, if you were to name two Sensei Shihans that you reference in kata that you could share, not to put you on the spot, but in reference of, I know, I hate saying look at YouTube, but to reference again. Yeah. Who are the two that you could just name, and just to give us something to look at as well? More so, I'm of interest as well of who your thoughts are in the way your brain's obviously gone. All this, holy shit, Takata! Like, wow, what's happening here? Love to hear who you nominate or suggest.
Well, Joe Swift Sensei was really an easy pick because he was recommended to me by Patrick McCarthy Sensei, who's kind of like the top gun in that historical, you know, investigative, you know, and again translating author, right, in a way. So, but having said that, you know, the teachers won't necessarily just show you everything right off the bat. You're drilling with a partner, and then you're kind of like, you know, you got to figure it out, and eventually. You know, you're like, you get this far and you're like, oh, what happened here, kind of thing. And then you kind of ask maybe, you know, and if you get the answer, you get the answer. But otherwise you're kind of drilling different things, and then things pop up by themselves also too, right? It's not just, you always got to ask and wait for the answer. So you're like, after a while, you kind of figure out the concepts kind of interlink, which is super cool. Yes. Because you could relate them to other things that weren't on the obvious or omote side, right? There's other applications you could put it. So in terms of people, Joe Swift Sensei was awesome. Was one fellow for sure. And then in Okinawa, so I was training also in Uechi-ryu, because one fellow that made a lot of big impact on me was Shinjo Sensei, Kyohide Sensei, who's Uechi-ryu top gun. There's many, but he's quite unique because he competed a lot in the kumite. And it's the Uechi-ryu rules are very similar to the Kyokushin rules, but scoring to the face as well. So he had that aspect of kumite, which I thought is important, because you could teach kata and all that and self-defense, but that's always in a preset format, right? You can only take it so far, because the techniques are evidently quite dangerous. You can only take it so far that you can pressure test it, right? But if you have a kumite background or a kumite aspect, you already know that if you do this, this is going to happen, right? But the people who never did kumite, proper kumite, you know, they're missing that little, you know, either nervousness aspect, you know, the stress factor and this and that. So when you're doing kata and you're drilling with somebody, you're like, okay, yeah, I know this can go there and this can go there, right? Because you've already experienced it in another, you know, different techniques, but in a full-on live scenario, pressure, stressful kumite scenario, right? So those two fellows are probably the most
awesome.
The two
looking forward to looking them up. We'll get some links up for everyone to get some reference as well.
Yeah, and Shinjo Sensei is a huge guy too, isn't he? I mean, he's just physically
he's quite tall, exactly. Exactly. For an Okinawan, he's quite big, huh? There's a few
Yeah.
teachers who are quite big and tall, which is quite interesting. So that also too, when he demonstrates techniques and he takes you, he chooses you, you're like, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is legit. You're like, yeah, I'm dead, right? You
Yeah,
know.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. He means the business. Yeah. I mean, and
Yeah.
that's an interesting point because you've had this exposure to a lot of Japanese instructors in Japan, like I have, and
Yeah.
everyone's different.
Hmm.
Everyone has their own sort of forte, they have their own sort of focus, their strengths,
Hmm.
etc., their visions. What would you say was the biggest difference from ja instructors in Japan? And I'll say
Interesting.
this, I want to be politically correct as well.
Yeah.
Okinawa is Okinawa. Okinawa isn't Japan. You know, Japan likes to
It is
call
a different.
Okinawa part of Japan, but Okinawa is
Yeah.
its own little country as far as I'm concerned. Um,
Yeah.
what would you say was the biggest, or well, was there a difference in the sort of view of karate or the passion
Mm.
that they have when you were able to compare the instruction you got in Japan and in Okinawa?
Yeah, good question. And also I have something to add after that. The passion, I think they all have it. To what extent they'll express that with you or share that with you is quite different. In Okinawa, it's very different, right? They're very outgoing. Um, yeah, they're willing to share a lot. So I
Mm,
think that was also a very attractive aspect. Here in the mainline, it's kind of in related to training too. The training format is a bit more rigid. I don't mean rigid in terms of tough. I mean rigid in terms of structure, the structure of the class,
mm,
or the bowing, the lining up. All that's a bit more rigid, a bit more military format. In Okinawa, it's a bit more loose. In some dojos, we don't line up per rank. Of course, you could come late to training here in Tokyo as well, or anywhere in Japan. That's accepted because people work. In Okinawa too, the same thing. It's not frowned upon. Yeah, it's just a different. The actual teaching is there. They're all super passionate and super dedicated. I
mm,
think to what extent they share it, you know, is a bit different, I think. Maybe
mm,
related to the number of people also, because
Mm,
I guess in Tokyo, the bigger dojos have a lot of people and they'll have a few instructors, right? So there's a bit less, I guess, one-on-one or uh, direct training time with the head guy. Maybe that aspect, come to
mm,
think of it. So I think if you're exposed to the main instructor or the head instructor or a high rank instructor, I guess over time you're being exposed to more stuff. They're
mm,
sharing more things with you. I think that's one thing to take in perspective. Like training back at Kyokushin Hombu, we'd have the regular classes, and that's there's not much shared, to be honest. Basically, it's just you're going through the whole routine, and then you hit kumite, and then you're doing things. In the sparring class, in the fighting team class, then there's a bit more instruction because they want the team to be strong. They want the Hombu team to win, right? So that was
right.
different. Then when Matsui Kanto would come on, then of course there was different things too. And then
Yeah.
same thing at Daido-juku when the instructors would coach, they would coach some stuff because there was some subtleties related to the range, related to
mm,
the blending of the techniques. And then when Azuma Sensei would teach, well, he would show his things too. And then
Right.
in Okinawa, so for the Okinawa karate, yeah, the tokucho, I guess the specificities of each system or each kata are quite subtle. So um, those things would probably be taught at upfront because to show the particularity of the technique and why it works or why it's being done. So back to your original question, yeah, they all have the passion and the experience. To what extent it's shared in the dojo, I think in mainland Japan it might take a bit longer, depending on the dojo or the instructor. I have that
Right.
feeling. While in
Yeah.
Okinawa, having those seminars too is different because those seminars were really unique. You're training 4 hours a day um, with a high level instructor who's there just for that, and everybody's flying halfway around the world just for that. It's a big event, so I guess the people traveling and investing a lot of money are, in a way, expecting something,
yeah.
and the organizers want the people to be happy, and then the people coaching, teaching, they want to feel that they did their job, I guess. So it's kind of a
Right.
bit of a different. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was an intensive seminar, so
Wow.
um, Yeah. So
Robert
those
Sensei,
aspects are a bit different.
you've grabbed all this over nearly, I'm going to, at the moment, about 30 odd years of training
Exactly.
again, it's not the right word, but you're cross training in it to a degree with what you've been doing.
Mhm.
Why, after hearing all this and all the commitment and all the discipline and all the teaching and things, why have you continued on? What is it that's made you get to this point? Not today. Each time you've adapted towards the arts, why?
Yeah. It's just the overall well-being you get from it, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, the physical aspect, the fitness aspect, of
Yeah.
course. And I've always liked the I guess the format of Budo training. So I was
Gotcha.
fortunate to have grown up in it. My dad had done jujitsu, classical jujitsu earlier, so my parents were very supportive of it. And I think that the whole martial art environment appealed to me. And
Yes.
no matter what, so if you're visiting this dojo or the seminars in Chiba that we used to do, you're training in different disciplines, just by curiosity, it's like, yeah, it's very, very appreciative and unique. You see this, and the array of ways to fight or protect yourself is mind blowing if you
Yeah.
think of it, right? It's
Yeah.
Now,
like
the
these
reason
people.
the reason
Huh?
I brought that up
Huh?
is because you then move on to your own thing. Am I correct?
Yep.
Let's
Exactly.
like, now that everyone's got a great understanding of the years you've done and the commitment and so forth,
Mhm.
and the teachers and the contacts and connections that you've had to build relationships with, what started to trigger you into this next thing?
You mean our dojo?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Well, it was always a dream to teach and to open my dojo as a kid. Even when I was starting in Kyokushin, I remember
Right.
I had written out design plans of my dojo. This is
Wow.
crazy. Eventually I'll get them. They're in Canada. I'll have to go get those. But anyway, I still have that in mind. And even with Kyokushin, I was teaching back then in community centers and in companies, and at Shian Gilbert's dojo I was teaching. So sharing my passion was always really an enjoyment to any level, kids, adults, competitors. It was always part of me. And then, so originally, I was supposed to open up a dojo in Canada and move back to Canada, and that didn't happen. So then being in Japan is like, what do we do? So that's why I was able to teach a lot of kickboxing and Thai boxing without any affiliation per se. It was I was coaching as under my job as a personal trainer. So I was able to really push that aspect. And then afterwards, well, having I guess come back to karate, I could say, I wanted to accomplish something in the Okinawa karate. So with Joe Sensei, again, basically started from scratch, go through all the ranks because there's so much material to cover, and then grade there too. So after that grading and then continuing training in Okinawa, back and forth, I was like, well, eventually now it's time to open up a dojo, and then just started looking for places, and I just went into the deep end. I way out. We just got a house, basically a building, and our first floor is our dojo, and it was right at Corona, right in 2020 in July. But we had renovated already, started renovation in 2018, 2019, step by step. I'm hiring some people. And then Corona hits, right? And we're like, now what do we do? And I'm like, just screw it. We gotta go. We gotta do it. We're not gonna stop now, right?
Yes.
And we just launched. I said, screw it. So then, luckily in our neighborhood, there's a big community, like young families, right? So a lot of kids. We're near a few schools and big apartment buildings. So it just started from scratch. Yeah, 3-4 kids. The group grow. I split the group and then build up. And then the adult class, we had a good base, not big numbers, but a solid base. We're just maintaining. But the kids really took off. And yeah, so I just wanted to share my original passion of teaching. And it's just been going on full on for coming up 4 years in July. It's gonna be 4 years
How did
already.
you
It's
build
crazy.
or utilize the templates of everything you've got to create a so-called syllabus?
Yeah.
Or how, my vision is obviously
Yeah.
of you going, right, how do I've got all this.
Yeah,
Where do I
exactly.
start? Do I start with
Yeah,
the dojo etiquette of Kyokushin and then implement some Kihon of Kudo with a little bit of how did that come about?
yeah, no, it's a great question. So basically, the karate Kihon remains very similar to Kyokushin, and Goju-ryu is very Sanshin based. So all the positions, Sanshin comes up often in many kata and in the Kihon. Well, you could work the Kihon any way you want, but I keep the basic Kihon same as we do in Kyokushin,
Right.
with a few slight variations, nothing much. And the katas basically are the Goju kata. So our first kata is Sanshin, and then the second kata is the kata called Fukugata Ichi, which is an Okinawa unified kata. There's three. The Fukugata Ichi kata resembles a lot to Taikyoku Ichi, so it's low block,
Okay.
middle punch. There's a high block and some angles added. It's nothing too crazy. And
Yeah,
then we
right.
move on to Geksai, and then Saifa, and then so on and so forth. For the Kumite, in Goju-ryu or Okinawa Karate, there's basically Yakusuku Kumite, which is Sanbon Kumite, Ippon Kumite in Kyokushin, right? So, but they're quite formalized. There's quite a big set.
Mm.
So we work on those as drills, as exercises, and training, but not in the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because we do the Ju Kumite, and the Ju Kumite we're doing throws as well. So again, there's so much to cover
Shit.
that one aspect I had to pull out of the curriculum. But you have to do Yakusoku Kumite, you have to do kind of drills for freestyle sparring, and with kids too. We're working with face punches to the face with the headgear. So you got to build them up a certain level of safety in terms of defense, and know how to control a bit their strikes, right? So we use a number system for striking. You know, if we're training in the dojo, punch to the face go 4 to 5. You know, kicks go 6, 7. You know, and then in terms of power, and then tournament, well, of course you're up there. You're going up full on, and they know it. So we kind of, the safety aspect is huge, but techniques. I put a big emphasis on the fact that the waza that we work in Kihon or kata are very different, and it's very difficult to close the gap between kata and Ju Kumite. It's always been a bit of a dilemma in my head, and now it's become less of a dilemma because I look at it as apples and oranges in a way. You're doing similar techniques. You're doing a kick. You're doing this. You're doing that. But the concept also, and the approach to it, the attitude behind it is very different, right? So let's say kata would be a self-defense or protecting somebody aspect, while the Ju Kumite is like, it's like already on. It's already a brawl, you know. We're already exchanging. So I tend to keep that kind of separate. So then back to the technical side, we do work the Kihon Kumite, which is in Kumite stance, you know, jab, hook, uppercut, elbows, and all that. And the kicks are basically the same. So it's not a big
that's a
change.
great little summary again in respect of time. And my next one, I've got one, and that is of interest after hearing that. The style that you've created and got, are you putting it under the karate umbrella?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with that, what has been your percentage, again, with all your experience and knowledge, in focusing on the percentage of stand up or ground? So how are you splitting that percentage? And then obviously if it's 50-50, then 50% of your time is spent in teaching takedown to ground and 50% in striking. And so how are you managing that angle, again, with all the knowledge you've got?
Yeah, no, good question. So now our dojo is very new, right? So following the similar progression to Daido-juku, and the link to the tournament, we participate in the Zendokai tournament, which is similar to Daido-juku. It's a breakup of Daido-juku, so very similar. The only thing is they allow more techniques at the beginner level for striking, which was really appealing for me as an instructor and for the kids as participants. But the ground aspect is very limited for now, to be honest. All we do is we practice ukemi, basic ukemi, and we practice throws. Our first age group from 4 to 6 years old, they don't do kumite at first. They'll do sumo. All the kids do sumo for that matter. Okinawa sumo. So grabbing the belt and just unbalancing, just play and have fun. I don't even show technique. you know, they'll learn to
like Kazushi, like off balance.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Eventually, they'll learn how to trip. Okay, you hook your leg, you push this way, you've just learned to trip, right?
Yes.
Then I kind of pointed out, oh, that's a trip. Do that one now. Do this one.
Sure.
And then eventually they'll do the hip throw.
Yeah.
But as we get to the first belt for the first group, then they'll start kumite. The second group, the second age group, 7 to 13, they'll do 3 months of sumo only. Of course, they're learning all the techniques, right? All the striking techniques, and working in partners, of course, but no jiu kumite. And then after 3 months, they'll gear up and do the striking, but they'll learn the throwing too. So only when the kids want to do tournaments related to the rules, they'll be allowed to combine striking and throwing. But there's no groundwork. There's only pinning. So osaikomi is pinning.
That's cool.
So you pin for 3 seconds.
Yep.
In those rules, that's another point. But then the next step, once these boys pass, I think it's Nikyu or related to their age, one of the two, then there's the ground. The time of the round is longer. And then also there's more techniques. There'll be chokes, arm bars, etc. All that stuff. So we'll get to that later.
So you've given your dojo a name. It's Tokugen, isn't it? Is that right?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah. So what was the decision behind giving that name to your dojo?
Yes. So toku is dotoku, as you're probably familiar with, is virtue. So the virtues that we need in daily life, not only as a martial artist, but if it's courage, if it's confidence, if it's respect, you know, those mental
things,
virtues, that are just kind of basis for everything, but
so kind of taking
right?
like the 7 virtues of Bushido, you know, it talks about courage and benevolence and things like that. And the Gen is origins, right?
Gen is origin or source. So
source,
Tokugen meaning the source of virtue here in the dojo, meaning our dojo is where we're going to develop those virtues. And then within yourself, well, we all have those virtues. If they're dormant or not, well, that's for each individual to find out. If you're living an easy life, well, most probably you're living a virtuous life. So for the kids and even the adults, you know, but for the kids, definitely to give them a good foundation of how to interact with their friends, with their dojo mates, with their friends at school, with the teachers, and their parents, all that, you know,
etiquette, all that kind of thing. So do you instruct in English and Japanese, or do you do it one or the other? Or
so
do you do it in Canadian French, or
not yet? Our theme is karate in English, so that's a big I think point. I mix English and Japanese in the classes. We have some kids from different nationalities. We have Indian kids, we have Chinese kids, we have some mixed nationalities as well. So those kids have a base in English, which is good because I'll address them uniquely in English, which exposes the other kids to English. And I make them count in English. I will count a stretch. I'll have them count in English. I have them repeat the name of the technique. So let's say we're doing right front kick. I'll go right front kick. They'll repeat right front kick, and then we'll kick it off. You know. So some stuff like that. On 2 days a week we have it.
How's the reaction been of a foreigner in the neighborhood in Japan teaching Japanese, something that they originally think is theirs, even though they're from Okinawa? But
I don't know.
You know, how's that been?
I think I've been well accepted. Luckily, I'd have to ask some of the parents individually. I don't know. I really don't know. But if they're giving me their kid, I think they're confident that we're doing something good. Which is really, really.
I think what you've said there, like as you've explained your journey, one thing that resonates with me is that, and it's something that you know Yui Shihan, right? Do you remember Yui Shihan from?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Okay, so I was talking about this on a couple of episodes ago. When he talks about original Kyokushin, he breaks it down into different generations, and he goes, everyone is doing one form of the original Kyokushin because that's what they were exposed to. And what he said about Sensei was that Sensei didn't break everything down, didn't dissect everything, didn't explain everything. And it was something you just mentioned before, that you have this accessibility to all these great instructors. They will explain certain things in detail, but the rest is up to your interpretation, and it's up to you to make sense of it. And I think that's what I'm getting
Yeah.
from you as well, through all of
Mhm.
your experiences
Mm.
and years of dedication and different stages.
Yeah.
You've learned that naturally to just dissect things, make sense of it yourself without being
Yeah.
given a long list of A to Z kind of instruction, right?
Well, we tend to see things, you know, as opposites, or this is different than that, this is different than that. But I think having gone to Okinawa, and then, you know, it's a small island, right? There's so many dojos there, there's so many styles, and these instructors, they have to interact, they have to get along. They don't all get along, but considering the percentage of dojos and trainees and instructors, they're doing a pretty good job.
Mm.
Right.
So from that experience, I've not decided. I guess I've come to the conclusion that I'm looking more at similarities. You know, this is very similar to this, and this is more similar to that. So it's more like a building block
Yeah.
feeling, that saying, oh, as opposed to, oh, this is different than that, or this is better than that.
Yeah.
And that's really pushed my training, my personal training. And again, it just fuels a whole new fire to keep kind of waiting, and like, oh, this is
Yeah.
this is that, and oh yeah, okay, now I know, you know.
You know,
Like,
we got a couple more minutes, lads. And in a summary from this awesome chat, there was a word that, again, you know, we all watch content in martial arts, and someone, I sincerely don't remember who it was, said, just keep expanding your skill set as a martial artist, right? We use common terms like cross training. Then in the Kyokushin world, it's stick to Kyokushin. Then in other means, Kyokushin instructors go, there's so much in there. You've just got to find it. You've got to explore yourself.
Yeah, you gotta go.
And in hearing your way of your travels and your experiences, you continue to upskill. You've continued to upskill without hesitation of, no, that's what I've been told, and that's the way it is. You use words like eye-opening that made me go, yeah, every time there has been an eye-opening moment within most of us in regards to years of training, we all then go, you know, the old, damn, right. That sits there, does it? Interesting. Yet we leave, and I'm not talking on behalf of everyone. I'm talking on behalf of, I'm someone that writes notes. I'm someone that goes, what the hell was that? I've seen that before, or, you know, and I'm in that frame of mind. And again, from a theme, from an episode, your skill sets in not just karate, but for all of us that are working day to day, if we stay on the same skills, don't expect this, you know, any other results, right? Don't see where personal development is going to come from if you continually set the same skill sets. Does that? I'm just sharing my take on this awesome chat.
Yeah. Well, even within a pure, if you want to call it a pure system, there's so much to uncover. You know? And like, we're fortunate to have the internet and have these videos and this and that. But if you don't feel it, if you don't try it yourself, you're only getting you know, it's like reading an instructor's manual. You're reading a guidebook, but you're not tasting it, right? You got to taste it, and then you're like, okay, this is
good call.
Now you know. Yeah,
that's awesome.
I think.
Yeah,
we've got a couple of
certainly.
minutes, Xian and Robert Sensei.
Sure. Yep. I mean, it's been great, and I mean, look, time's gone by so quickly. We're going to have to get
kidding.
again. We're going to have to. We'll dissect this and say, okay, we want to find out a bit more on this aspect, because there's so much you've revealed in such a short time. But I mean, something you'll probably share with me, and I've learned this through karate, but also my 30 odd years here in Japan. And it's something you just said now, similarities. Okay. To survive in Japan as a foreigner, because it's not our home country, it's not our home culture, it's about finding a middle ground. And what I mean by finding a middle ground is not looking at the differences. And when you're explaining how Okinawa, most of them get on, it's because the culture in Okinawa is like that. Everyone says, okay, difference is normal, but where are we similar? And if we can focus that positive thought process on that, we can sort of, there's reciprocal benefits. And
different mindset,
people put their pride to one side, and they do it just for the pure joy of sharing their knowledge. And I think that's what I get from what you're talking about. And it sounds like you're on to something really good, and it must be of great benefit to the neighborhood and I only wish you, you know, more and more success in what you're doing, you know.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. No,
Well,
it's great sharing.
a nice
I
phase
think,
one, I think, this chat
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
sincere. I
yeah.
think a lot
To
of
be
people will be
continued.
like
Yeah.
like I said at the start to the Shian and Sensei, right, this will go fast. Don't worry if we've missed anything. We'll get back to it. And that's the cool bit of the Japan Chronicles. We're slowly maturing with it in regards to guests like yourself who are exploring
Yes.
and giving us some insight to what's happening on the ground there and how you've traveled around the world. And we hear of these stories, as they say, and we know of these people, but this is the cool bit of getting someone like yourself on, Robert Sensei, and sincerely appreciate your time as a phase one. I reckon I'll call that a chapter one.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, our pleasure.
I'm
Everyone,
looking forward to it. Anytime you guys.
Let's put up
I'm here.
some of Robert's. We'll put up Robert Sensei's links. Let's get to you know, that angle, and more so if you're floating around Tokyo, Japan, send him a message.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll be honored to, you know, and you'll be surprised, Sensei Robert. There's people that just pop up and go, "Hey, I listened to the shuffle, and oh shit, okay, great."
Yeah.
So send some
train at our
messages, and
dojo?
no doubt
Come visit.
you're going to be getting a couple of followers after this gets put up.
Yeah, I mean,
Perfect.
yeah, Pat, I'll send you
Yeah.
links to his dojo home Facebook page, etc.
Please.
and so forth.
Mhm.
But he gets visitors from overseas all the time.
Mm.
Very
Yeah.
welcoming. And it's a different
Share some
experience.
stuff.
You know. So yeah, if
Mhm.
you're in the neighborhood, I'll have to get my butt up there and come training with you sometime soon. too.
Yeah, we're so close, but so far.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Well, big us, everyone. Thanks so much. Thanks, listeners. Please put your comments. It's been really
guys.
good. No doubt you'll put some comments for Robert Sensei. And thanks, Yan Sean, for organizing this. Thanks, everyone, for your time. We appreciate it. Big us, everyone. Us.
Thank you so much, guys.
Us.